During my average week, I don't have a lot of spare time, and I certainly don't have a lot of spare time to watch TV on a regular basis. But over these last couple of weeks, as I have watched TV, there has been an ad that I've seen several times that has tickled my funny bone, and you've probably seen it as well. It's an ad for popular antacid, and I need to set it up here just a little bit in case you've not seen this. The ad features three characters: a mom, a dad, and a young woman who is apparently a senior in high school applying to college. Well, it seems as though the young woman goes out to the mailbox one day and gets a letter of acceptance from a college and runs into the kitchen and says to her mom, "I got into one of the best schools in the world." And then they replay the ad, now from the dad's perspective behind the newspaper. And what he hears as his daughter runs in is, "I got into one of the most expensive schools in the world." And you can just see the dad there behind his newspaper thinking, "Oh my gosh, what's it going to cost me, and can we afford it?" What's it going to cost us, and can we afford it? It seems as though that's probably the likely question that got asked somewhere in this crowd that's following after Jesus in this morning's gospel from Luke. What's it going to cost us to be your follower, Jesus? And Jesus turns and shares what is a very difficult message. What will it cost? Well, it will cost the reorganization of priorities, to take things that may be higher up on our priority list and put them lower on the priority list, and take God, who may be lower on the priority list, and put him at the very top. Now, in that second reading that Kevin proclaimed so beautifully, St. Paul, in writing to Philemon, actually addresses the cost of being a follower of Jesus. Philemon must have been, as nearly as we can tell, someone who was relatively successful, because at one point in his life, Philemon was able to own slaves. And in fact, we know from this little section of the letter that Philemon owned at least one slave in particular, the one named Onesimus. Onesimus, it seems, has gotten into a disagreement with his owner, Philemon, and has run away. And he's found Paul, who is now a captive, on his way to trial in Rome. Onesimus, it's also clear, was not a believer in Jesus. But in his time with Paul, Onesimus has become a believer, and he's been baptized. And during that time with St. Paul, while Paul has been imprisoned, Onesimus has been a good helper to Paul, who now is fairly advanced in years and needs help with many of his daily tasks. But they're at a point now where Paul is sending Onesimus back to Philemon. And Paul very carefully expresses to Philemon exactly what the cost it will be for Philemon to continue to be a follower of Jesus. Because Philemon, who has up until this point seen Onesimus as something that he owned, and I use that word something, not someone, he has seen Philemon as a possession. Paul now challenges him to see him as a brother in Christ and as an equal. It's difficult for us to imagine what an earth-shaking way of reorganizing priorities that would be for Philemon, because we don't live in a world that practices slavery any longer. But imagine having to reorganize one's priorities in such a way as to be able to see someone who was at one time property now as an equal. That's a pretty challenging reorganization. And it is the cost. It is the cost for Philemon to continue to be a follower of Jesus, to be able to see his one-time slave Onesimus as a brother and equal now in Christ. That's the kind of cost that Jesus is trying to get at as he speaks to those in the crowd who are following him as he makes his way to Jerusalem. And along this way, Jesus has been patiently teaching them about how to live as disciples. And now it seems as though they're coming to a point where a number of them need to make the choice. Can we? What will be the cost? And can we afford it? It's a fair question that all of us should ask ourselves every now and again, especially when it comes to looking at our priorities. Jesus is very clear about putting our relationship with Him at the very top, and all other relationships from self to family to possessions flow beneath that. And yet we know that there are times when we've turned that on its head, and we put other people, we put things, other stuff, priorities up at the top in place of God. Jesus says it cannot be that way in order to be a disciple. In order to be a disciple, we have to turn our priorities upside down, making sure that God is at the top. And so the question for us is very much the same as the question those first followers of Jesus faced. What's it going to cost to be a follower of Jesus? And from that flows an important question. Can we afford it? And from that flows a still more important question. Can we afford not to?